Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me today again is Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions. I'm looking forward to hopefully making this a regular occurrence. I really enjoy the conversations that we have and really just kind of breaking down all the madness that seems to go on. And jokingly, yesterday we were talking about what we might discuss. And I jokingly said, well, by tomorrow, there's probably going to be an entirely new field of crazy things to discuss. And it seems like every day that's how it is. So find Charlie Robinson to have an interesting view on a lot of this stuff. So let's have him on to discuss the madness of the world today. How are you, brother?
Well, I'm fantastic, but you're correct that we just have to wait a full day, a full news cycle, and everything will change. Everything that was important, desperately important, just a day ago now magically just fades away, and let's focus on what Trump said last night at the event that he had where all the leftists lost their minds.
It's funny. I purposely sort of boxed that out last night, and I haven't looked at it today. I bet you if I had, you're right. It's just all these different, but I can already see that's kind of consuming the conversation. It really doesn't ever stop. It's just one. And I think there's a very clear, engineered aspect of that, to overtake the conversation and hide some of the bigger things. It never stops.
It's like when the media releases bad news or corporations release bad news on Friday afternoons because they know it'll get buried by the weekend. You know that if they've got something that's unpopular, they're like, let's roll it out the day before. We'll let the media have it for a couple hours, and then we'll pivot into the Trump's big address to the nation, and that will overshadow everything. Or the missing $2.3 trillion, and then 9/11 the next day. You know how that goes.
Right. All coincidence. so if you have thoughts on what happened, since I haven't even looked into it at all, I'm curious to see if you have any thoughts on it. I did see that there was a lot of hype beforehand about I'm actually going to say very clearly, this is all secondhand. I didn't look, somebody had told me that there were reports, but it was through corporate media, partisan media, about how the Democrats were going to be making noise and trying to disrupt. And I'm like, that doesn't surprise me if that would make the case, but how childishly stupid. And if that actually happened. So did you watch any of it? Did that happen?
I did not watch it. I just saw some of the clips. I said there was some guy that made some sort of a ruckus and they threw him out to
congressman.
I don't know who he was because he didn't look familiar to me.
Okay.
That doesn't mean anything, but he looked lost. He looked like somebody that, shouldn't have been there. But I guess they nod him, hey, goodbye, as they were throwing him out, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
There were, the typical unexpected or completely expected sourpuss Democrats that were arms crossed, sitting down the whole time. I guess one of the things that they did was they brought out some 13-year-old kid who had recovered from cancer and wanted to be a police officer, and they made a big thing about him. And then the Democrats sat for it while everyone else stood up and clapped. And then Nicole Wallace was on with Rachel Maddow, and they talked about I hope this kid doesn't kill himself, because everyone's like, what? What are you talking about? It was very weird. They've lost their mind. If it's fun to watch them get exposed for, they sell themselves, the hardcore left, as being compassionate. We're just about the people, and how dare you? We're standing up for the unfortunate. And the first chance they get to show their true colors, that it comes right out. There's no compassion there. They just want it to go their way. And if you're outside of that, then they want you to die. It's gross, but not too surprising.
And I would say, as always, not unique to the partisan left. Right?
Oh, no.
I think the same exact dynamic. It's interesting though. It's more you're right. It's more about the bleeding heart idea of the left versus the right's more we're fighting for your freedom and liberty, and neither of them are true in my opinion. It's all just about trying to control your life. But that's interesting though. It's just sad to see. And give me your thought on this. That this kind of, it's never the real picture on either side of it. It's always this cartoonish, you and I could go through the many real gripes and criminal actions of everybody in that room, and instead that's about his racism, and it's about his over here it's about their woke politics. It's just funny how it's man, there's so much real crime, and do you think that shows that they're all choosing to omit those stuff, or are they in the mindset that that's actually what matters? And that would show me that they're all controlled by something else. I mean, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, if we were going to have a real honest conversation about the rampant criminality inside that room, everybody would get put up against the wall and get frisked.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're all maybe not Thomas Massey. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, though. I'm like kind of going yes, but I'm so pessimistic for government. I'm like, I'm not going to let myself have hope for that.
I know. I feel the same way. Like I like him. I want to like him. I feel like I should like him. But I also remember, Dr. Ron Paul is that way too. I mean, he's the only guy who could. I've seen him 3 different times at an Acapulco bring the house down. By going up there. And you would normally think if I were to just read off the list, hey, 20 years, Republican in Congress from Texas, we're going to bring him up to the stage. You'd rightly get booed, of course, if you just. But it's Dr. Ron Paul, who is always consistent in his views and was outspoken against the things that I think freedom-loving people actually care about. Sound money and get the government off my neck and things like that. But I mean, they'll allow them to pontificate about who's the most racist person inside that room or who doesn't want to fight for our freedoms or some ridiculous Barnum statement like that. But if we wanted to actually get down to the criminality that's happening in there, that never gets really talked about. And that's bipartisan decision. Like but they know, like if I start pulling on this thread over here on that guy, it eventually will lead back to the person who's been giving me a bunch of money and I don't really need that heat. And so let's just leave it alone. So
right. That's the whole, one nation or blackmail. Like they're all mafiosos at this point is what it really seems like. And there's like, it's kind of like the self-enforcement, that's kind of how I see it, where, that there's allowable level of criminality, but they actually mostly probably hate each other, but there's things they just know they won't touch on because then they can be held accountable too. But there's been deviations in that. Like, and I think there's a reason for that. And I tend to think it's from outside influence, but that we've seen those shifts from the last like 3, from Trump to Biden to Trump. We've seen some different shifts where, for example, both of them have done things to that Biden did something to Trump and then Trump did something to Biden. Like usually the game has been like where we don't go after the previous guy because that means that you'll go after, but we've seen some shifts in that way. And I don't really know what that means. I tend to think it's because it's always who benefits, right? If you can see that neither side's benefiting, where the government here isn't benefiting from it, you wonder who is and who's driving that, I
think there's a genuine, there's very, very few components of Washington, D.C. that I find to be genuine. But I think that there is a genuine hatred of Trump. I think a lot of these people view him as the guy who could come in and mess up their grift or start talking about, there's an unpredictable, and I understand that there's script, a lot of it is scripted, but there is, he does kind of go off the script from time to time and start talking about things that makes people very nervous. And I think that there's a legitimate hate. I don't think that the Rachel Maddows of the world are faking it.
I agree.
The Joy Reids. Yeah. I think they legitimately despise him. They may have a variety of reasons for that, but I don't think that part is theater. I think that maybe you'd be in jail, locking up Hillary Clinton. I think that is theater at the highest level. Well, but as far as like the talking heads, you could add to the same point though that he probably means that, probably doesn't like them, but that was whether it was ever actually going to happen was theater. Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because ultimately, it's the same point. It's the kind of, I think it's personal, where back and forth, there are very clear political worldview differences between left and right. I think it comes down to whether it's an Israeli control or technocracy or, whatever you think, or just the deep state, whatever's like the guiding force clearly is, ultimately what they bow to. You know what I mean? Like where it's like, it's kind of like the Great Reset thing we saw with the world, where my opinion is, we saw a lockstep. We saw Russia, China, like adversarial on the surface countries all go in the same direction and act in unison. And so how do you miss that? To me, it's because all of them are like, okay, all of these tools will help me better control my own people, help me subjugate my people. And so we'll go in so far as we can use those tools and we'll feign that we're going in these directions. But the moment that it goes against what we want, we'll probably, and we did see that to some degree, and so that's what I really think it comes down to. They're all in line when it comes to control over your lives.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of that top-down authoritarianism that these countries really love, and they would love an excuse for more of it. And if somebody like the WEF gives them the opportunity to do that, or the World Health Organization says, well, listen, you can outsource this authoritarianism to us at the WHO, and we'll do it for you. They go, okay, fine. I mean, as long as you control our people, I can live with that. And the minute it becomes sort of detrimental to their personal, their country's sort of nationalistic needs, and it's like, well, maybe I'm not going to take part in all of this. I mean, because Russia, as you said, Russia was deeply involved in the World Economic Forum. Then surprisingly, now they're the enemy, and everything that they do is the worst thing you've ever seen in the world. So it's funny how they come together from time to time. But I think George Carlin talked about this, 30 years ago. There isn't necessarily a need for people for a big meeting where they all get together. Yeah, sure, they have the Davos and they have they get together at the UN and whatnot. But these people that are at the tops, they don't need to be told what's in their best interest. They know what's in their best interest, and they're willing to work with other countries as long as it supports what's inside their interest. So as far as like we're going to all sit down and have a meeting and talk about it in secret, sure, that does happen with Bilderbergs and these events that have been going on for 70 years. But it's also not completely necessary, because at the highest levels, they understand what's in their best interest and they'll move accordingly.
Yeah. Again, back to like the mafia point, you can see, there's different whatever you call it, families, of different groups. They don't act but they are times when they act for the betterment of the actual mafia, dynamic. And, and that's the whole self-enforcement, right? Is where, and this is what I see politicians as. Like, it's certainly possible that is the mafia today. They just decide to go, hey, you guys got a lock on this. I see what you're doing. I'm going to put a suit on and act like I'm that, and the point is, if somebody stands up and starts being too criminal, like I often see Gavin Newsom playing that role where he's like, takes things a little too far, right? Stands out, like does the thing before everyone's ready to do it, and I argue, I haven't seen any real pushback, but you would argue that was where they step in and take care of that person, some accident, something happens, and then, now we're back to normal. No, it's like, that's just all hypothetical, but I think that's how you see the kind of self-regulation around all this.
Sure.
But so the Trump, back to the Trump speech and discussion, I didn't watch it again, but what I tend to see from those left or right is it's usually just standing up and just kind of going, here's how we're supposed to say, or this is how you're going to view what happens over the next year. Like, this is your talking point set up for how we're going to see what we're going to do, and just kind of like taking down the notes or really framing what happened already as the way that you're supposed to repeat it. And it's just how these games go for me. And that's why it all seems like so much theater. But anything else out there before we get into some of the points that I think we're all seeing right now that and maybe the ones that we kind of already talked about, in your mind and your work and what you've been studying over the last week, 2 weeks, what's something that stands out to you right now that just is good?
I've been working, I'm writing a little bit about Trump right now for an episode, the good, the bad, and the orange. There's just some things that are very Trumpian, that I don't know that are necessarily going to happen, but it's just interesting to hear him when he comes out and starts talking about, like the Greenland situation. He won't stop on Canada. He won't stop on the tariffs. And he keeps talking about this stuff. I don't know how much of that. There's some good things that he's done. I'll be honest. There's some good things. There's some really bad things he's done. And then there's some things that I just describe as the orange, which is, it's hard to tell whether it's real, whether it's talk, whether this is a negotiating position that he's trying to create from the beginning, where he's saying, my starting position is I'm going to slap massive tariffs on you, or if it's part of some, grand economic transformation that's happening that's being set up to happen in the future, and we're just seeing these pieces that seem a bit disjointed, and maybe over the next year or two it'll come into focus a little bit more about what is he really doing, talking about the gold and Fort Knox. It's a weird conversation that nobody was asking for necessarily, and now all of a sudden they're talking about that. So I'm wondering a little bit more. I watched a great interview with Matt Smith, who is Doug Casey's podcast partner, and they were talking about the role of gold moving forward and what's happening and how and what Trump might be actually up to with devaluing the dollar, and it was just it was such a great interview. I had to watch it twice, and I just thought, God, what if there is a much bigger play here that seems disjointed with Canada and Greenland and all this stuff, but upon further review, or once you have more information, it paints a different picture. So I'm keeping an eye on him, as we all are. I have no emotional energy necessarily towards him one way or the other. I think he's a clown. I think he's he's in the World Wrestling Federation's Hall of Fame, which is fake sports. He's got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's an actor. So where does the actor end and the authentic politician, if there's such a thing, begin? Or is there any? Or what is this whole thing? So he's a fascinating character to watch, but I don't get triggered the way a lot of people on the left, especially on the left, but not limited to that, get by him and his behavior. It feels like, back to Carlin, when you're born in this world, you get a ticket to the carnival. When you're born in America, you get a front row seat. So that's kind of how it feels sometimes when you're watching him. You just feel like you're watching the craziest show in the world.
Yeah, it really does. And, it's the interesting thing about the orange is a funny way to frame that, is that it's actually, I can't tell whether it's a ploy, a plan, or it's sort of like they've lost control of their own fall. You know what I mean? Like, we're essentially like, I've seen some examples of this where something starts as like a meme that's shared by like Insurrection Barbie or one of these like Elon sycophants that are constantly, and then Elon captions it and goes interesting, or whatever, something, whatever, and then that gets captioned by Trump on Truth Social, and then all of a sudden it's like it becomes something that's part of the conversation because it's become this momentum mover in the team sport Republican side, and then all of a sudden it's like, is that real? Like, or was that a joke? And then now they're passing legislation, and it's like, even the community's like, you're being trolled. It's like, they just passed some legislation about it. It's really weird. And so give me your thoughts on just that. Like, you think it's possible that some of this is like, they didn't mean for it to become real, and it just, now there's like, either feel like they have to, or said, screw it, do it anyway, because it's going to make us popular,
Well, a prime example is that AI generated commercial, well, I don't know what you would call it, for Trump Gaza, where it was him with BB, and they're sitting in their bathing suits out in the, and there's gold Trump and all that, and you watch that, you go
around.
You go, this is A, the most disgusting thing I've seen. B, completely on brand for America. C, is this a future? Is this predictive programming? Is this the direction they want to go? And then you see that Trump is whatever on Truth Social, reposting it on Truth Social, and you go, okay, it's one thing if it's just a bunch of guys that are goofing around are doing this, but when the president sees this and his first thought is, oh yes, everybody that follows me also needs to see this as well, this would be a good look, then I think, God, I mean, either you're getting the worst advice ever, or you truly believe this is a good thing, which is way more dangerous, or you're just trolling. And if you're just trolling people, I don't really understand the point, because you're making yourself look like a bloodthirsty lunatic who wants to depopulate an entire segment of the population from a region in the Middle East. And I don't see how that could be good, except that, as we know, he's completely and utterly compromised by the Israelis. So I don't know. That to me was, boy, I mean, I was just sort of like, I hope the rest of the world doesn't see something like that and think, oh, this is how all of America thinks. Because if they did, that would really be a stain on us. I mean, there's plenty to go around, don't get me wrong. But if somebody in Lebanon sees that and they go, this is what you guys want, this is what America wants, it's like, no, that's what the American empire wants. For sure, 100%, that's what they want. But we, the people, we don't want that, or at least the majority of us don't want that. And that's the frustration I feel with all this. It's like, we can be extremely clear about what we are, what we stand for as a group. I mean, as a country, I don't get all weepy about tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree or anything like that. But still, as a people, we should stand for something. And that's not it. And if the rest of the world thinks that is what we're about, then no wonder we have such a negative reputation around the globe. No wonder people that are Americans, when they go backpacking, put Canadian flag patches on their backpack instead of American flag, so they don't get messed with. So I see some of this and I think, well, it's kind of funny, haha, like weird. But then I also just wonder the power of social media. If for some people out there, they see this and they think this is a representation of what America wants, it is not. It is a disgusting stain on us, but it's being reproduced and retransmitted by the president. And so it comes as almost like an official seal of approval on it, which is gross and disgusting. But so I mean, I have big problems with the direction things are going. It's hard to tell what's real these days, and of course also as we move further down the road towards technocracy, when you start to have these deep fake videos, or you have everybody's voice. I mean, you and I have said enough on camera and into a microphone that somebody can make us saying anything that we want. Like,
Right.
that's the next phase where we get to a point where you don't know what to believe. And if you can get people to not believe their eyes, then you are in a real, you got them in a real bind.
Yeah, William Casey, I think 67, right? CIA director. When everything the American people believe is false, then our job is complete, and that is real. I mean, I verified myself that that's actually, Anyway, I think this is the game. But back to the trolling port's interesting because, I mean, so he shares it, right? And so even if it's like that's the game, well, he's just being funny or trolling. Well, it's irrelevant. You don't know that is the point. You're assuming that to make that make sense, but it's still him going, look at this, And so to me, that only serves one entity here, Israel. I mean, that's what that showed. That is for Israel's benefit at the expense, to the detriment of Trump and the American people. I mean, that's just everywhere you look. But so is it trolling, right? I would argue a little bit of the opposite. I would just say there's a benefit to that. I agree with you entirely that it's ridiculous and shouldn't be happening. But I could at least acknowledge and understand that you could use that in tactical way, like put that out in order to get certain people to react. And then, but it's not, the point is, it's not in anybody's interest other than, I would say the Israeli government or people that want to see that, which would be Trump's administration and building out Gaza and that, because that's what they're planning to do. But the other point I thought was interesting was like Fort Knox you mentioned, right? Where the timing for that for me was interesting because I don't know if you saw the Zeldin it was actually a video that he followed up and made clear about, but this video went around where he was referencing the Titanic and gold bars. I'm sure you probably saw that, right?
No, I didn't.
Well, basically he said that, that they said the Biden administration, they were throwing gold bars off the Titanic.
Oh yeah.
$1 million. And I'm like, okay, pretty sure we all would understand that's an analogy. Pretty sure the Titanic. Okay, but that seems self-evident to me. Alex Jones put out a video saying that he's like, oh, look, that's real. They're talking about real gold bars. I swear to God, I covered it on the show. Zeldin followed up with a video on the EPA that said that made it clear. We're just talking about tax dollars. It's an analogy. So my point was that kind of happened. And then right on the tail of that, I see this Fort Knox conversation spin out. I just thought that was interesting timing. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about, where these like fake conversations that we've seen spin around in that exact sphere almost every time. The fog, the drones. I mean, many of them had new narratives every day that their sources confirmed what the drones were that never panned out. It's like that kind of thing. But I think that that's what happens. Then it becomes like this momentum to keep that going, but also to deviate from things that were just proven to be false. And so, but what I wanted to get to on that was you made a point, something popped in my mind that's very interesting about the possibility of that gold, right? What if that's all built in the idea to like build the idea that it's not there, even though maybe it is, in order for them to essentially get rid of the gold. I think it's important right now for them to remove sound money from the conversation if we're dealing with a new digital currency. What are your thoughts on that? Just as a hypothetical.
They definitely want to move away from sound money. They have they've been busted. When I say they, I mean the big banks,
the hierarchy
financed by the government. They've been busted rigging marketplaces for years and years, shorting paper silver into the market, shorting paper gold into the market. Friday afternoon, here it comes, boom, get that price down. So they've been busted. They've manipulated the LIBOR, the COMEX, Forex. They've all been found guilty for this. So this has been going on for a long time. The idea that a country, United States, that runs a Federal Reserve printing press. I just have an episode out today for Macroaggressions called "The House Always Wins" on Jekyll Island, and it was talking about Colonel Mandelhouse and how he was involved with Woodrow Wilson getting the Federal Reserve created. And you look back on that and you think, oh my God, I mean, how different this planet would be if it wasn't for central banking. I mean, it's a stain on humanity, and it's crippled us for the last 100+ years because of it. And this is what empires do. They despise that, they need to have, if you've got the goose that lays the golden eggs and you can print money all day long, you want to keep that thing going for as long as you can. And gold represents a threat to it. Silver represents a threat to it as well. Not that I think that we're going to go to a silver-backed currency, but it's tangible asset that doesn't have counterparty risk to it. So if I own it, I don't need it to go. For me to have it go up, I don't need for it to go down on you. And it is what it is. It's your own asset that you can store away. And it reminded me of the times when they confiscated gold. When they sent, it wasn't just like for a month or anything. It was like for 30 years. You could not own gold in the United States. And having it on a gold-backed current system, and having Nixon take us off of that and peg it to oil and all of the geopolitics surrounding that, they've been manipulating this for a very long time. The idea that we have gold in Fort Knox, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but the government has no interest should theoretically have no interest in exploring that if they're going to try and keep this fiat carnival game going further and further. And as we move into, as you mentioned, a digital version of it, central bank digital currencies or stable coins that are programmable or however it looks, they most definitely don't want it backed by anything other than a promise by the government, which is what it's always been backed. I mean, I guess it at some point it was backed by gold, but then was it really, they confiscated gold. So it's hard to it's hard to say how the United States is going to move forward. But my assumption is if it's sound money, they have no use for it because they are interested in this fiat scam, which gives them unlimited control of the printing press, and which was one thing when it was just like dumb dollar bill, Federal Reserve notes that you stick in your wallet. But now, if it's programmable and it's trackable and it's measurable, and they can turn it off or they can set it to expire, or they can make it so that it doesn't work 15 minutes outside of your city or whatever they want to do with it, that is, I've sort of been saying this for a while, that is the hill to die on, because once you get into a world where your money is controlled, directly, daily, minute by minute, surveilled by the state, then you are in a position where you are a serf working on the plantation, and you'll never be able to save. When they say, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Yeah, you'll own nothing because you'll never be able to save for anything, because your CBDC or your stable coin or whatever will be evaporating in your account, or it'll be set to expire because, hey, we got really bad Christmas numbers. They just came in, and sales were down. So get to spending, you plebes, and we're going to make 30% of your CBDCs disappear in the next 90 days if you don't get to spending. So, we can extrapolate out how diabolical this could get if they have control of our money in this sense.
And as you well know, the CBDC is very concerning. But what is actually way more concerning, which seems the direction they're going, is the stable coin kind of tether dynamic. And that's what seems to be the direction. And people are fixated, rightly so. This is how this game usually is played, on what Trump's saying will never allow a CBDC. Like that's the end of the conversation. And that's very concerning. Oh, good. Do you have a point?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, right. There's still not enough people that are paying attention to CBDCs for my liking, but even if they are, I hope they don't get that head fake by Trump saying that CBDCs will never happen. Yes, let's just say that he keeps that promise. Okay, fine, but what else is there? There are other ways to do that. Whether it's a Tether stablecoin, whether it's USDT, whether it's Bank of America coin or whatever, Wells Fargo coin or whatever. I mean, as you can see, when it comes to like certain blockchains like Solana or whatever, you can build all kinds of things on it. You can, some idiot in his garage can put together a coin in the next day and launch it. So if they can do it, the banks can do it. So it's important for us to not get distracted, also not get caught off guard with the terminology too, central bank digital currencies, and keep our eyes on any sort of programmable money. If the government is enthusiastically supporting it, it's probably not going to be the best for you. It's just
I agree. The problem is people act like only half of any moment is the government, right? It's like, no, it's all of it, right? Right now we're fighting the government. They pointed the Democrats, where the Democrats are going, we're fighting, we're the government trying to fight. It's an illusion. That's the point, as always, is it's all of them. And I agree with you completely. But see, back to the gold, it's interesting because, it seems as if they're setting up this conversation based on nothing, essentially. Like, is it actually there? Now, as you probably know, that's been something that's been floated over a while in the independent media field for a long time. Like, is it tungsten just with plated gold? Like that conspiracy theory has been floated in the past. And so why that popped up, I kind of think it was on the momentum of that conversation. Either way, it's being built on the unknown. So why the hype and the momentum in the field? And so maybe they're building towards like the argument that it's not there, whether we get that proven or not, which seems to be kind of the way this all is going. So then that sets up the idea of why this is necessary, or rather a new, what it will be now pegged to, right? So you made a good point there. So gold was what it was. Then it didn't just go to nothing fiat, which is really ultimately how it's used, but it's pegged to the oil dynamic, right? So what will this new thing be pegged to? The argument doesn't seem to be made as if it's necessary, but right now, what are they talking about setting up? A strategic reserve, right, of the cryptocurrency. So that could very well be its own little reserve, or it could be what they decide to peg the new kind of system to. I would see that making sense. And so this brings me to the point you just made, which I think is really interesting. This is happening right now. U.S. Marshal Services can't say how much crypto it holds, complicating Bitcoin reserve plan. Now, you probably already noticed, and let me know if you have any insight on this, that Trump tweeted out about how XRP, ADA, and Sol will be good for the reserve. Didn't mention Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean he's not going to include it. Did you have any thoughts on that one part, that whether Bitcoin will be included?
Yeah, well, it seems like somebody in his circle got to him, because he tweeted out a second tweet after that saying, oh, and Bitcoin and Ethereum will be in there too. We love them. That should go without saying, something like that. Well, it doesn't go without saying. You need to sort of mention that when you're talking about holding shit coins for a strategic reserve. And the problem, I think, with the differentiation between Bitcoin and the other coins is that Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO who can go lobby them for. I mean, there's plenty of people that love Bitcoin and feel the need to lobby the government on their behalf, but there's no Satoshi CEO who's making the decisions, or there's no Vitaly Buterin who rolls back the chain, several years ago to unwind some stealing that happened on there. Like, once you see all that, you go, well, wait, what are we doing here? This is just as compromisable as the Federal Reserve game, maybe even easier now because it's digital. And so look, I like Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin to do well. I don't love the government loving it, though. That's sort of the problem. Like, I liked it because it's decentralized. And when you pool it in the hands of, say, even if it's Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy, or it's the government, when it's pooling in the hands of certain groups, that kind of is antithetical to what Bitcoin is all about. Bitcoin is, I'd rather the people have control of it and have more of it than the government. I'd like the US government to like Bitcoin like about 10 years from now, once everyone else has had a chance to sort of get their hands on it. And so I get very nervous when the government is involved with anything, especially when it has to do with money, because that they're just looking for a way to can we pump it up and then dump it? Can we crash it? Can we have all our guys can we have BlackRock get involved and pool a couple 100,000 coins in their IBIT? Can we centralize it into the hands of some sort of Bitcoin strategic reserve? It's probably good for the price, of course, when you have a buyer like that. Then you start to get into this game theory of like, well, if the United States is announcing that they're going to be buying a bunch of Bitcoin, and you're some obscure country out there, and you might think, well, maybe I should front run them. Maybe I should start getting some before they, while they're working out all the details, maybe this small African nation should start buying some more, or whatever. And then you can see it spiral into a huge price appreciation. But that, of course, again, it makes me nervous when you start to see things like that when the government's involved in buying and holding. But it doesn't matter what I think about it, because the cat's out of the bag, and the government now knows about Bitcoin, and they've been fighting it for a long time. And now I think they're at this point where they've had to realize that they're just going to accept it for what it is. But I don't love the other cryptos being added to it, because I don't find that they're not on the same level as Bitcoin. They're much different in terms of just the overall structure of the coin. The fact that there is somebody that you can go knock on the door at Cardano and say, like, hey man, like, we're the FBI, we need to talk to you. That's a problem, when you can do that. So it'll be something interesting that plays out over the next few years. And of course, when I talk about the good, the bad, and the orange, Donald Trump launching his own Trump coin, like right before the inauguration, perfectly on brand for the orange. You know what I mean?
That's
Just parachuting in, rug pulling his audience, and putting a bunch of money in his pocket and bankrupting of it. Oh, just the perfect, Hawk 2 coin of the Republican Party. It's
same with Malay's coin, right? I mean, actually, Malay's was much more severe, and that was like a legitimate pump and dump, and he didn't even care. He's like, too bad. But Trump's and Melania's, look at the price compared to what happened. I mean, it's a little bit more of an extended pump and dump. It's the same thing, though. People put a lot of money in that because they thought it was going to be something. I mean, it's a fraction of the price at this point, and that you could argue that's just because it didn't succeed, but it's also profiteering and a conflict of interest. You could also argue that there was a lot of money, I guess, money laundering or whatever. There's no accountability through that. Foreign governments could have pumped money into that, and they were directly benefiting from it. It's just there's so many examples like this. But bringing this back to what I think this is exactly like what you were saying. Well, I would add first though that there's a lot of disagreement. It's actually pretty contentious, which I get why, but it's interesting that it's so contentious. I'm of the mind, and I think you can easily prove this, that the original Bitcoin chain continued with BSV. I think Bitcoin was forked off, and that was even possibly a 51% attack that happened all the way back then. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. Here's just a little graph, and all you can really see is, for those that understand the technology, really briefly, the point is that the chain had continued, and you can verify this until when we saw the forks, right? We got you had Bitcoin Cash, and then eventually BSV. Now, I argue that Bitcoin Cash, where that forked, that was the original continuation of the actual vision of Bitcoin. What it forked off to, that was actually a manipulation, in my opinion. And then BSV, which actually stands for Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, it's identical to the white paper, and it literally is what upholding. I won't go into it all. My point is, whatever the people's opinion, just think about the possibility that BSV was actually the continual vision of the real Satoshi vision for what it could become. And the Bitcoin, which has been stifled in a lot of ways because of the system, has now become mainstream. The government's now using it. I mean, this was designed to fight the government and the financial system, and now they're employing it. So you have to see how that applies. And so this is where I want to take that, is that I'm seeing this, right? All of a sudden, U.S. Marshal Service can't say how much it holds, and there's a lot of opaque kind of situation here, and this is just reported by Unusual Whales, as they cannot account for billions of dollars worth of crypto. I just simply wanted to consider the possibility that this is yet another example of this, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a 51% attack is. Bottom line is, as this white paper actually said, the system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control not just not owning Bitcoin, but controlling the CPU power for mining. It's as long as the honest nodes collectively control more than 51% of the system. And so the problem is now is that you can prove that there already, before all of this, were two companies that owned, if they collected their power, more than 51%. And so I'm of the mind that that's long since happened. And so what that really means, for those that don't know, is that they could effectively spend Bitcoin, it's called double spending, and then alter the chain to where you wouldn't be able to see that. But it gets much deeper, as you were referencing, where this goes, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin, that there's ways they could build from this that go into things like artificial intelligence and governance. And that really worries me if we're in an opaque situation. I'm wondering whether this might represent an example of a failed attempt, and that's why it's being recognized that there's something that's missing. These are just hypothetical. But what I wanted your thoughts on, as Seven Seas points out, I've been saying this was coming, but people just keep telling him crazy. This is Ramaswamy saying he's calling for putting every public expenditure, state, county, and municipality on the blockchain, which I could make an argument for why that would be a positive thing in some context, but I'm very concerned about this. Seven Seas goes on to say everything everywhere will eventually be on blockchain, and it won't be for freedom and transparency. It will be for control and only control. Being set up by local networks begin setting up local networks for trading commodities now, because eventually you won't have any opportunity. Larry Fink is excited about this. All of this falls in the bottom of my model. Crypto is a scam. So give me your thoughts on that general, direction for all of this, and whether you think that where this is going is not just about money and a reserve, but more so about control using this kind of AI intertwined with all of this.
I think we can see the control of this happening in the persecution of Roger Ver, who was on Thursday, the fourth day of Anarchapulco, like 2 weeks ago when I was emceeing there, sort of kept under the radar, but we had Roger Ver on remotely from Spain, of course. He was unable to speak. He chose not to speak during the interview. He had next to him his the director of a documentary who was representing him. Wasn't his lawyer, but I thought it was his lawyer because I kind of came in halfway through. And Roger has been a huge advocate of the Anarchapulco community. He's financed. I remember 2019, Bitcoin.com, always had a big presence there. And I was new to it, and I didn't really understand the block wars, and I didn't understand the history of it. I just know that there's some division between the guys and what was going on. But we see that prosecution of Roger Ver happening. First of all, if you get on the wrong side of the government, just sort of like a little hint, and you're international, you're sort of global, and don't go to Spain. Don't ever go to Spain, because they were talking about that a little bit during the same thing happened to McAfee. He wound up in Spain and he gets arrested. So the Spanish law says that they won't arrest you or hold you for a crime if it's not a crime in Spain. If it's a crime in Uganda, but it's not a crime in Spain, then they just say, well, we're not going to do anything unless the American government asks them to.
Of course.
And if the American government, then they go against their own constitution and they retain somebody like John McAfee, or in this case, Roger Ver, who is now waiting for extradition any day now. And that's a Biden DOJ situation. Maybe there'll be pressure put on Trump and he'll do what he did with Ross Ulbricht and allow Roger out. That would be fantastic. But I think that they recognize some of these OG crypto guys, the Bitcoin guys, especially, as a threat too. I mean, I think that there's some of these guys they don't want out wandering the streets, looking into what they're doing with the chain, or as you mentioned, maybe double spending or hiding it in certain ways. You could easily do it from me. I wouldn't know where to look or how to find it or how to catch it. I'm not that technically savvy. I don't understand the details, but that guy would. Roger Ver would know. And
to really quickly add,
you view him as a threat.
Sorry, I just really quickly, you wouldn't be able to see it, is the point. Like, that's the whole point, is that nobody would be able, not even experts in the field. But that's unless there was something that was not done properly, So I agree with you. I think they see them as a threat, but people should ask in their, why? What's the real threat here? Because you have a different perspective on what should be used. That's not enough, right? So I agree with you. I think it's about these people being it's because arguably it's an open, that it might highlight that they are using this in a nefarious way, right? Like they're showing like the double spending, or even just where I'm going with it, which is beyond that, is where we can see this being implemented in ways that will go beyond even a reserve currency or a strategic reserve. But it is going beyond that. How this can be used, just the blockchain technology, as he's highlighting, for governance. And actually what's funny is James Corbett was just using the word, I think it's oligocracy. It means like government through algorithm. And I'm like, I'm like, man, we're in a very crazy time. And so we might as well from that just go to, unless you have any more thoughts on the crypto side of it.
Well, the Bank of International Settlements is talking about their universal ledger. Right. And that's the rail system for all central banks. And I would suggest that who controls that controls banking. And if you can get to the point where the BIS is putting everything on their version of the blockchain and running it, then you have to get nervous when the central bankers are enthusiastic about it. The guys running the Carnival scam, when they like it, or when Larry Fink likes it, or when Donald Trump likes it. Whenever they start to like it, I get a little nervous. You don't even have to see 4 steps ahead to understand the game. You just have to know that these guys are master manipulators, and if they're into it, it's more than just money. It can't be just about money to get Larry Fink excited about it, because they've got all the money that they need. They have access to trillions of dollars of capital. It's got to be about something else. And if they like it, then I sort of don't like it by default. But that being said, I have Bitcoin, and I would like for it to continue on, but I know that there's real questions about how that pivot went back in 2017, I guess. And that the authentic, hardcore, ideologically aligned guys are saying, no, what you see now is not what it used to be. It's not following the white paper correctly. And I'm the wrong guy to have that debate. I just don't know enough about it. But I do know that there's some there's real concerns about that.
Yeah, well, there's many points to get into. It's largely about the block size, and early on they restricted the growth of the block size, which restricted the growth of the entire dynamic, and so it restricted that from becoming what it was supposed to become, which is a challenge to the financial system, right? And that was on purpose. And so then once it forked off, Bitcoin Cash did go on to increase it, And arguably BSV at this point can even challenge Visa if you really break down the speed of transaction. And that's why BSV, you can't even really buy on the exchanges. There's like only a few that allow it. It's like, how does that make sense? Well, it's clear because that is the real challenge. That's the threat to the system. The rest have been co-opted to become the system. It's pretty simple, you know? But so what's funny is as you're outlining all of that, which I agree completely, it makes me uncomfortable when Larry Fink and central banks and Trump, and they're all high-fiving about the new system. And don't confuse any of that with the deep state, ladies and gentlemen. Even though it's everything we always represented as the deep state, totally not. Central banks and bankers and lobbyists. No, it's all a heyday. We're Unity team now. But this brings it into AI governance, right? So I want your thoughts on that, because this again, sort of a hypothetical, but I kind of like, how is this not happening right now? Especially with the weird opaque aspect of all of this with, I don't know if you've seen the whole Doge administrator thing. Apparently they're saying it's Amy Gleason, who was the administrator, or like the one under during when it was called Doge Digital Services. And now that she went away during the last administration, and now she's back, but it was nobody really talked about that. And even though clearly Elon Musk is obviously in charge, even though he's just supposed to be an advisor who doesn't take any action. And so I'm wondering whether that's all a big show, and that right now we're literally testing AI governance. Just a hypothetical thought that somebody threw out the other day, and I was like, wow, that's actually a really interesting thought. So what do you think about that?
So I can have two simultaneous thoughts at the same time. The first thought is, I love that a lot of these government workers are packing their offices into cardboard boxes and perp walking them out of the buildings and going home because they don't have a job anymore. I love that. We should shrink the size of government a ton. I feel that way about the human people that have decided to go to work for the empire. So the more of them that lose their job, the better. However, I am fully aware that if you are running some sort of AI governance, those people are unnecessary anyway. You don't really need as many people to run, you just need the programmers to program the machines to do this. So I can be happy that these people are having to get on, Indeed.com and submit their resume and go look for a job, because they should. If you work for the IRS, or if you work for USAID or the National Endowment for Democracy, you should be out of work. You should be looking for a job and selling your house and downsizing and all those things because you've worked for the enemy. But I worry about. I worry about the role of the technocrats in all of this, and it feels as though we're cheerleading the technocracy too. But when I do that, when I applaud that these people are losing their jobs, I also simultaneously have to go, God, am I cheerleading for like the acceleration of a digital government system? Because we're already starting to get into this weird world where it's like AI psychotherapists, you can talk to this computer about your problems and whatnot, and the things are, oh God, we're going to put therapists out of business. Well, maybe not, but starting to normalize the process of talking to your computer about things, and where that goes and where that leads to overall government. And of course, Brave New World, a book that came out 100 years ago almost, and talks about this future in which the very, very few control the many, and they do it digitally. And so right. I'm always a bit, I'm never too quick to applaud any of this stuff, because I'm trying to figure out what the other angle is. Because if they're doing this, if they're getting rid of 100,000 government employees all at once, it's like, that sounds great. And they're clawing back all this money that's been spent on frivolous things. That sounds great too. But if it's happening, what am I missing? Where's the other side of this? Is this a setup? Is this the pump fake to get us up in the air and as they go around us? So I'm always a bit suspicious of any of their. And anytime anyone is enthusiastically cheerleading the government doing anything, I have to get a bit suspicious about why that is.
Yeah, well, that's just being objective and discernment. But what I would add a few things though is like, what's interesting is I trust me, I get the mindset of, like from an anarchistic, like all of it should go away. I'm like, yes, good, all of it, wherever, chop it off, right? I get that. But what's interesting though is that they're not getting rid of the problem. They're slicing off people that helped the problem, which is, I guess, a step. But if you're still using USAID, which they are, if you're still using these things, so it's more of an illusion. And then the question becomes, how do we even know the people they got rid of are the ones that were the problem. We don't. It's all an assumption based on what they tell us they're doing. It's a Democrat or, well, we don't even know. We haven't got the name of the supposed person that didn't give the Epstein file. I don't even believe that's happening. You know what I mean? Like, that's just where my reflexive stance is. If nothing's being shown to you and it's a self-serving narrative, I'm open to the idea that it might be there, but how would they not? Like, why aren't we seeing a perp walk of the Democrat that held back the Epstein files if they know? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. And so I worry that what we're seeing is a game of like you say, whether it's for the interest of the AI governance or just because they're getting rid of the people that might have pushed back on what they're going to do, who might have insight into the criminality they're taking, or maybe they're getting rid of all the deep state. You know what I mean? It's like that we don't know should be the point. But I like USAID, for example, obviously, I think anybody with a brain well before the partisan show that's been going on is aware that USAID and National Endowment for Democracy are regime change engines that have been using whatever the current thing is. Woke politics was really clearly a thing for a while, but we know before that it was whatever else got them in the door to regime. That's the real point. So it's all a cover. So if all we're doing is going after all the woke and yes, I completely agree, but that's not the full picture, But really, for me, it wasn't so much about an indictment of, or one way or the other about Doge, but just the idea of whoever it is, whether Biden or Trump or whatever, using artificial intelligence to effectively govern us. Like, I think we all know that is where this goes. Like, that's what they're talking about with efficiency, even the efficiency movement being the precursor to like the technocracy movement. It's really alarming to me. So I don't know. I think the way that goes is the exact technocracy we're all worried about. And if we're at a point where there's less oversight or any more opacity than we've ever seen before, all because we know, oh, well, he's the good guy. Or like that's the sentiment. I mean, I've never been more concerned about what's going on with all this. And then on the money side of it, I mean, I've personally been going through these spending documents, not because the New York Times said, even I was covering this weeks ago, that I could prove that half the things they were showing, I shouldn't say half, but a lot that I was finding were inaccurate, were things that were canceled before they ever started, things that were still going on, even though they said they were gone. And now they're getting caught pretty thoroughly, where all these contracts, some of them were deleted back when Biden or even before Biden, right? I mean, I've proven this is the case, regardless of whether the Democrat newspaper is talking about it. So it's just crazy to me that there's a lot of dishonesty. And I think that what that shows me is that what we're being told is not actually what's happening. And you know where my mind goes, brother. I mean, I see Israel's influence on this more than I've ever seen in my life. And I'm super terrified about what that means. So, I mean, I went in a lot of kind of directions on a larger topic right there. What are your thoughts on any of that? Where'd your mind go?
Yeah. Well, it's about accountability too. If you fire all the human employees that you normally would say that guy did the thing.
Yeah.
He's the problem. Now, when you move into everything is run by computers, who do you complain to when it all goes wrong? Who do you fire?
Right. Who to arrest for the drone strike? Right.
Right. When it's not, the sergeant didn't decide that we were going to blow up that building. Palantir's computer program did.
Right.
So take it up with Alex Karp and Peter Thiel and Joe Lonsdale and all these guys. Like, go talk to them about it. Like, what do you want from me? I'm just doing what the computer tells me to do.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, obviously with war, it's going to be diabolical because we've already seen that with what's going on in Gaza, that these decisions are being made by robots. And so who will program the robot? Who programs the program? And if that guy is a Unit 8200 alumni, well, then guess what? We're going to blow up every single hospital in the region because because the computer tells us that there's people in the basement. There's terrorists in the basement, So you're in a Terminator situation, right? Where like at some point they're going to come back for I don't know, Sam Altman. Somebody's going to come back and we got to kill Sam Altman.
Oh, that's crazy.
We've got to cut. We got him back from the future. We got to take care of him. Like, what is going on? Like,
that's
you
wild.
don't understand where this is going. This is going to a place where there's zero accountability, unfortunately, and that is the brave new world. That is the direction that they've pontificated about. Maybe you want to call it predictive programming. I'm fine with that. But the Committee of 300 was deeply behind this 100 years ago, pushing out this agenda that this is really where we need to go. We're going to use machines to help us, and then ultimately we're going to use the machines to govern us. And if you get to that point, then you have to ask, who is the program? If you are programming the machine to help you, if you've got AI is whatever you want it to be, right? If you've got a desktop assistant and you put, I need to find out, give me some stats on this or that, and you use it for improved efficiency, I got no problem with that. When you're using it to determine which building needs to be turned into rubble, then it's more than just me asking the question. You have to ask who created the system, who programmed it from the beginning, and what are its tendencies? What's the computer's ideology? Is the computer, Greater Israel Project leaning? If it is, then all of the outcomes are going to mimic that. And so we're in a situation now where it's technology is a double-edged sword. It really can help us do amazing things. And I don't want to demonize technology, because as we evolve as people, we start to see that there's some great benefits. But man, if it's in the wrong hands, and I would suggest that most of these Silicon Valley guys are the wrong hands, because once you get to a point where you have all the money in the world that you could ever spend, you start looking for things to buy that don't have price tags on it. You start looking for things like, let's remake the education system. I mean, Rockefeller and Carnegie did it. You don't think Elon Musk is going to do that? He's going to tackle that at some time? Oh, we got rid of the Department of Education because it's outdated. Here is Grok classroom.
They're already talking about it. Yep.
Boom. There you go.
Yep.
Are they talking about it?
Yeah, I've seen it promoted already. Not necessarily directly from Elon Musk about Grok, but generally in the community and in the inner circle of Trump, they're talking about using this to effectively, for like you said, for medications, for checkups, for school, all sorts of things. I've seen it floated many times. Or how about just another conversation of maybe trying to seek their own immortality? We all know that's part of it. It's like there's so many ways to look at this. But yeah, I mean, I think the clear direction is. I would actually add, by the way, I will say that I don't, when it comes to artificial intelligence, I'm happy to say never. I see there's far more potential risk to everything we think we care about than there might be benefit. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not willing to roll the dice on that. That's how I feel about it. But I get what you're saying. There's a lot of clear benefit that could be there. But so where I'm back to this, what you're saying, we know that in Israel, they're using artificial intelligence to kill people. They've made that clear. Even Alex Karp, I'm sure you saw, was like in this. Now, there's two separate conversations here about Palantir and what we're pointing at. But let's be clear that they're doing the same thing. But the point is that Karp said publicly and, killing people. And it's like, it just seems like a very strange thing to put forward. And how do we know that you have the right mindset or the morals, and especially as you're supporting a genocide? But the point is that they have, if you read these articles, made it very clear. The IDF members speaking to 972 magazine, that they're not only being told to take the advice from the AI, but that they're being pressured to meet a certain quota. So they're being pressured to hurry and not think about what they're being told. It's directly in the article. And so the problem is that becomes they told me. My leader told me and the AI said. And so who do you hold accountable? And they're already using that kind of excuse, which brings me to this point. I'm sure you saw, which we can prove that Palantir is in a strategic partnership with Israel, applying the technology of their AI. So it's hard. You can't decouple these two things. And that was in January 2024, well into the genocide. And there's Karp and Thiel. And of course, we know that Karp and Thiel are both very immersed in, more so Thiel on the side of Trump, but Karp is now with Thiel and they're all supporting Trump, as Karp has said, that this is, as Derek wrote, election 2024, Zionist technocrats versus Zionist technocrats, is I just see that that's where this goes. We're in a world where they're literally building out this control structure from people that are literally committing genocide. It's hard not to be concerned about that. But, we were going to get to a lot of other random things, but I really actually enjoyed a lot of what we talked about today. Before we finish, feel free to get into what I was talking about there. But I just want to say that, I really enjoy talking with you about all this stuff, because I find that we, I don't know, I find it entertaining, but also enlightening. So what are your thoughts on that to end today?
We have to laugh at the absurdity of all of this. It's very serious conversations to have. And I think that when it comes to reaching, my audience, I have to wrap it in a dark humor, sort of laughing at the absurdity of it all while simultaneously understanding how serious this is and the direction that we're going. It is, it's worth paying attention for those people that are outside of our, your family members that don't really care or sort of walking through life, or they've got, I got to get the kids to soccer practice and everything. I get it. There's a lot that's a bigger priority in your day-to-day life. And is this really going to affect me? I'm never going to go to the Middle East, and who cares? And all that stuff. it's easy to be dismissive of it and to say, oh, well, that's just the future. But the future is here in some respects, and this technology is being, there's a digital prison being built around us, and we're not conspiracy theorists for recognizing it. We're conspiracy analysts that are analyzing actual things. I mean, we could speculate and sort of ask the question as to, like, why would Israel want to, depopulate this? You can ask the question, why? The facts are that it's actually happening.
Exactly.
So it's a measurable observation. So for those that have their heads down and aren't really paying attention to it, boy, it pays to be, I know there's a lot going on, but it pays to open your eyes a little bit on these topics. And to the extent that you can understand them, just realize that if we allow the government to build this digital prison around us, and if you're waiting to hear it on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News that it's time to get yourself extracted out of this or get your money out of the bank or whatever, you're going to be waiting a long, long time. You'll be the last person to figure it out. So one of the things that's been great about your show is that you're so early on this that for the viewers get the opportunity to make moves accordingly. You give them enough advanced knowledge that they can do X, Y, and Z now, as opposed to after the fact when it's already happened, when it's safe to discuss it. And I, we were going to talk about vaccines and RFK Jr. and all that stuff, but once Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson are talking about, well, maybe we should ask some questions about the vaccines, it's too late. It's 3 years too late. So when you're early, you sound crazy. We know that, but it doesn't mean that we are. So I hope that people take the time to wrap their heads around this to the extent that they can, and connect with their family members or the people that will listen to them. And maybe it's not always your family. Sometimes it's just strangers.
Right.
That connect with you a lot more than your best friends, who you would think would listen to what you have to say about this, and you find out otherwise. So it's a pivotal time. It's a real important time to not get lulled into this false left-right paradigm, to see it for what it is, and to recognize that if we are not careful, we're going to get ourselves in a situation where those 15-minute cities aren't theoretical. They're actually happening, and it's controlled by the technocracy, and we cheerleaded it on. I just don't know that if I could live with myself if I saw what was coming and didn't speak out about it.
Yeah. Whether they call it freedom cities or 15-minute cities. I mean, just ask Honduras. It's already happening, right? I mean, it's very clearly that this is going forward. But and since you comment on that, I'll include. We didn't get into it, but I'll include my show on it from yesterday if you guys want to know more about that conversation. What I love about our conversation, Charlie, is it's just organic, right? There's different talking points we have lined up, and I just love having these conversations with you, man. But I'll also comment on one thing that I think is interesting, is that it jumped into my head that Gaza. A lot of people ask, especially with the kind of America First discussion, why are you caring more about that? Which is funny, even though we saw in the midst of this early administration where they were pointing at Europe and everything else, and it didn't care when that was happening. Right. But the point is that my mindset is that it all matters, clearly. But if you want a reason to make the connection, like you were highlighting, Gaza has been existing in a digital prison, both kinetic and digital, but for a long time. Okay. And so they understand what our future looks like right there. And if you want to look at a point where that's the future's coming, or like they say that next year, I mean, that's where this is right now, as much as they're trying to, it's almost like everything. It's like accuse you of that, what's the saying? Accuse them of that, which you are guilty, right? Like accuse them of what you're doing, right? It's kind of seems what's happening, but that's a good thing to think about. But whether you think that matters or not, the point is, as we've highlighted today, this is clearly something that's building around you. So you can choose to accept that it's going to be for the good, right reasons, or you can just be objective and show discernment and question all of it, which I hope we can all do, But anything else you want to throw out there, brother? Like upcoming events?
I hope that people will go to activistpost.com and bookmark that as an additional source of information. You don't have to get rid of anything that you're currently using. Just add this also, and take a look at the articles that we're republishing, because it's there's a lot going on around the world. We've got fearless independent journalists that I'm republishing over there. we're talking about the things that will get you kicked off of most platforms, but that's okay. And we need the viewers' help. If there's something that you find out there that you like, please share it with your friends and family, or those that you think will listen. We're adding a share feature, a social media share feature that should be up this week. So we have some fun. There's a podcast section there as well. You know, I know that people get their information a variety of different ways. Sometimes you want to watch it, or listen to it, we've got you covered there. So I hope people will check out Activist Post and naturalblaze.com. And I will see you at Third Eye Carnival in about a month. Right.
Are you going to be there for the birthday party before, or are you just coming for the carnival?
I'm coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Good. So the 3rd. Is that the 3rd?
I don't know. 4th, 5th.
Because the 3rd is, so basically we have the Third Eye Carnival, and the day before it starts, we're doing Steve and I's little personal birthday party. So
I'll miss the birthday party.
Be as big as everything else, but you're welcome to come. So everyone we're just going to be sitting around jamming and like kind of at that location before. So
awesome.
It'll be fun.
Awesome. I encourage everyone to go. I mean, coming back, I just got back from Acapulco where I was emceeing that event, and they don't want us meeting in person. That is for sure. They do not like that. When like-minded people get together, we come up with great ideas. We start to network. We make connections that are international in scope. And these events are crucial. So if you're somebody out there that wants to, hey, you know what, make this incorporate this in, a weekend into your vacation, get out there and meet some like-minded people from around the country, and you'll feel a lot better afterwards. We did this in Pueblo for the Third Eye Carnival last summer. It was fantastic, man. It's nice. It's a great place to connect with people, and then you go off and you've got you feel a little bit better about yourself. I'm not
You're not alone.
Sees this. I'm not alone. And especially after the isolation of the couple of years of COVID, what that did to people psychologically, it's really good to meet in person and connect. So I look forward to meeting you in person in about a month.
Outstanding, brother. Well, I'll see you then. And as always, everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.